And welcome to this English lesson about math. I'm not sure which subjects in school were your favorite. Maybe math class was an enjoyable place for you to be. Maybe math class was really, really boring. But either way, whether you like math or don't like math, I think this will be a good English lesson for you. We all use math every day somewhere, whether it's figuring out how much money we need to pay for something and how much change we get, or just trying to calculate how much we have to buy if we're building something. We sometimes need to use math. And so in this English lesson, I'll talk a little bit about math. I have to admit, some of the slides, there's a lot less pictures in the slides and a lot more numbers in the slides. So once again, welcome to this English lesson about math. So you'll notice I have the word math and I have the word maths here. And that's because there's a difference between North American English, where we use the short form math, and British English, where they often say maths. So for me, I just say math. When I talk about numbers and adding and subtracting, when I talk about going to a class where I'm going to learn about mathematics, I would say math. I would just call it math class. So again, if you are on the other side of the Atlantic, if you are learning British English, you would most likely say maths, and both are more common than the word mathematics. We don't often say, I'm going to take a class on mathematics. We would instead say, I'm going to take a math class. So mathematics, the study of numbers and equations and all of that fun stuff, which I will explain in a bit. Math, the short form that I use, and maths, the short form people would use if they are over there in Britain across the way. We also have what's called basic arithmetic. So mathematics is a general term for everything to do with math. But when we talk about basic arithmetic, we're talking about adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Kids, when they go to school, one of the first things they learn is basic arithmetic. They learn to read, they learn to write, and they learn how to do basic arithmetic. So that's things like this, where you see 2 plus 3, which equals 5, by the way. So you're hearing me already start to use some of the English language we would use when talking about math. So let's get to the four most common. So you'll notice I've put a number of words at the top because some of these are used to describe the equation and some are used to refer to the equation. So when you add two numbers, you use the plus sign and you end up with an equation like this. So if I wanted to add 3 and 4, I would say 3 plus 4 equals 7. So notice I'm throwing words in there and I'm using things differently. I'm saying if I want to add two numbers, I would write an equation like this. If I wanted to add the number 3 and the number 4, I would say 3 plus 4 equals 7. So we would refer to all of this as addition. When you're learning about addition in school, you're learning how to add numbers together, and you would do that by writing equations like this. 3 plus 4 equals 7. Hopefully that made some sense. It's the add and the plus are used slightly differently, if you've noticed. And then when you add two numbers together, you get the sum. So the answer when you have addition, when you add two numbers together, the answer is called the sum. And then we have subtraction. So when you subtract, or when you take away, or when you use minus, it's when you have one number and then you take a number away from it to get a smaller number. So in this equation, I would say this: 9 minus 3 equals 6. I could also say 9 take away 3 is 6, or 9 take away 3 equals 6. Notice I use equals and is interchangeably when I talk about equations. And I would use the minus sign. We could also say 9 minus 3 equals 6. That works as well. And again, we would refer to this as subtraction. When you're getting paid at work, there's a lot of subtraction. You get a certain amount of money, but then they take money away for certain things like benefits and taxes. They subtract a lot of money from your paycheck. And the difference, or sorry, and the answer to an equation where you're using subtraction, the answer is called the difference. So 9 minus 3 equals 6. The answer 6 is called the difference. I hope you're not getting too bored with this math lesson yet. By the way, I shouldn't say that, should I? I think there are a lot of people who love math. I myself do like math. So I'm assuming for most of you, you're like me and enjoying this lesson. Then we have another basic function. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word function. That's a higher level of math. Another form of basic arithmetic is to multiply or to use the times sign. So this is called multiplication. That's a hard word to say. I almost said it wrong. Multiplication is when you take numbers like 2 and you say 2 times 3 equals 6. So when you multiply 2 by 3, you get 6. 2 times 3 equals 6. Notice how, just like add and when I was talking about add and plus, multiply and times kind of work a little differently as well. 2 times 3 equals 6. This is a multiplication question. And in this question, I will multiply 2 by 3. I hope I'm not confusing you, but do note again that multiply and times are used a little differently when you talk about this equation. Let me say it one more time. 2 times 3 is 6, or 2 times 3 equals 6. And that is, of course, called a product. So the answer when you multiply, the answer to the question is called the product. 2 times 3 equals 6. 6 is the product. And then we have division, or when you divide. So when you have a number like 35 and you divide 35 by 7, you get the answer of 5. So I would say this. This equation is an example of division. In this question, I'm saying 35 divides 7 equals 5, or 35 divides 7 is 5. So again, we refer to it as division, but when we talk about the action that's taking place, we use the verb divide. So 35 divides 7 equals 5. And the answer when you're doing division is called a quotient. So 35 divides 7 equals 5. 5 is the quotient. So that was your basic arithmetic. Should I go over it real quick one more time? No, let's just move on. No, let me go back. So you have addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. I'm not sure why I didn't put division in brackets. There was supposed to be like a visual reminder for you. But anyways, those are the 4 parts of basic arithmetic. We also have long division. When you're talking about division, there are a couple of ways to do it. This is what we refer to as long division, where we put the number in the middle, the dividend, and then we put this little bracket with a line kind of, and we have the divisor, and then on the top, you'll eventually get the answer or quotient. I'm not sure if you like doing long division. It was one of my favorite things to do when I was in elementary school. And so you've heard me use this word a few times. When you have numbers on a page with symbols like this, 4 times 4 equals 16, this is called an equation, okay? So when you go to school and when you learn math, you will have a lot of equations and there will be no answer. And you will, in your mind, need to figure out what the answer is. So luckily, I can still remember that 4 times 4 equals 16. And that's an equation. And you'll notice that there is an equal sign or an equals sign in an equation. So the reason I have 2 spellings here is because depending on where you are, you might say one or the other. I use both. So I would call this an equal sign or an equals sign. But if you're in America, you might say one. And if you're in Britain, you might say the other. But Canada's kind of a mixture. Canadian English is kind of a mixture of the two. And so I use both of them equally. So we have what are called fractions. And a lot of times when kids learn fractions in school, we usually show them pie graphs, or we talk about pie for some reason. As you can see, this pie or pizza has 8 slices, and 3 out of the 8 slices are yellow. So we would say 3/8 of the pie is yellow, or 3/8 of the pizza is yellow. I'm pretty sure this isn't a pizza or a pie because I'm not sure if any pizza or pie is purple with yellow pieces and white pieces. But a fraction is when you have one number on top of another number, a numerator on top of a denominator. Fractions are still used because we don't use metric for everything. We still use what we call the imperial system. So we measure things in Canada in feet and inches because of our American neighbors. So we still use things like, you need to cut this board 6 foot and 1/4 inches, or this board needs to be 12 1/8. So fractions are still used, even though we've replaced them, I think, with decimals in science and things like that. We also have the term percent. So when you have anything out of 100, which actually, if you look at percent, it has the French word cent, so 100 in it. So if you have a test and the test is out of 100 and you get 93 right, you would have 93% on that test. So percent simply refers to a number that is out of 100. So it's basically a fraction out of 100, but instead of writing it over 100, we just put the percent sign after it. Then we have what's called a ratio. So when I think about ratios, I think when I mix oil and gas for my smallest lawnmower, I need to mix oil and gas in a ratio of 1 to 4. So I put 1 part oil for every 4 parts gas, and I mix that together, and that's how the engine runs. So when you have a ratio, you're talking about, well, you could say things like this: how many men and women are at your workplace? And you could say, oh, we have a ratio of 1 to 1. For every man, there's a woman working at our workplace. Or you could say, oh, what's the ratio of students to teachers? You could say, well, it's about 30 to 1. For every 30 students, there's 1 teacher in the school. So that's ratio. And then similar to fractions, we have decimals. So if you have a fraction, 1/2, or a half, we would call it, it is the same as the decimal 0.5 or 0.5. So notice in my part of the world, we use the dot. In some parts of the world, they use a comma as their decimal point. But for me, if I am going to write a decimal, I would write it this way. If you want to think of something like pi, which is 3.14159265. I can't go any further. I used to be able to go further. There's a decimal point in pi. So 3.14159265. Yeah, there's something 89. Anyway, so you guys can figure that out. I'm not going to try and figure out pi to more than 5 or 6 decimal places. And then we have what's called an exponent or exponents. So if you see something like this in math, 4 to the power of 2, the answer to this would be 16. It simply means that 4 needs to be multiplied by itself. So 4 to the power of 2, when you have the exponent 2, it means that you need to multiply it by itself 2 times. Well, once really, 4 times 4. I think you know what I mean. We have something interesting in Canada where we don't have pennies anymore. We don't have a 1-cent coin in Canada. And so when you go to the store, when you pay, it's either they either need to round up or they need to round down to figure out what you owe. So if I go to the store and if I buy something and the total is $1.03, if she says that will be $1.03, the machine automatically charges me $1.05 because we need to round up because there's no pennies. I can't pay 3 cents. I can't give her a $1 coin and then 3 pennies because we don't have pennies anymore. So we round up. Round up is when you take a number and you bring it to the next highest number that makes the best sense for that situation. For us, it would be to the next 5-cent point. So $1.03 becomes $1.05 when you go to a store here. And then $1.02, this is where I'm happy because I save a bit of money. $1.02 becomes $1 at the store. So if I go to the store and I buy some candy and the total is $1.02, I will be charged $1 because they will round down to $1. Then we have something like average. So average is when you have a few numbers in a row and you want to know what the common average is between them.